I started using natural materials really at the start, actually. I grew up from whenever I was about 4 years old, grew up relatively in the countryside, and so there was just me and my sister and fields. So I guess that was something I was constantly surrounded by as a kid. I didn't really ever get brought to in Belfast, there wasn't really very many art. There's an art scene, of course, but whenever I was a little kid, it wasn't the kind of thing that we were taken to look at. And I guess I probably didn't really know what normal art materials were, maybe. I think a lot of the kind of inspiration I got whenever I was at school was actually kind of extravagant photo shoots of haute couture stuff in fashion magazines, and then there probably would have been more kind of unusual temporary things happening in there. And I've just always been interested in how things change, or I suppose over time it's become an interest in how the kind of relationship between how different things change and how you can manipulate that and how it affects your relationship with the material or your understanding of yourself. Yeah, so whenever I was still at art college, I made the first piece with fruit. And with strawberries as well, and I made a number of pieces with strawberries now, and they're kind of seductive and visceral at the same time. Like, they smell really, really amazing, even whenever they're completely covered with mold, and it takes so long to install the works. Especially with those ones, by the time I've finished installing, at the beginning of it's already started to decay. So that kind of evidence of change is constantly present. And the more recent ones that I did with strawberries, actually, they had taxidermy animals in them as well. So there was that kind of contrast between decay having been arrested and being allowed to continue within the same work. And animals, I started using animals really kind of early as well, but they weren't taxidermied in the beginning. In the beginning, I would have had a real problem with the work with animals being taxidermy, because it's not really the animal anymore. It's like a form that you've sculpted or cast with the skin on it. So I was just using dead things that were either decaying or they were desiccated or things like that. And then I got to a point where I had a really kind of clear idea for a piece of work which involved a fox standing up, and you can't make a fox stand up without taxiderming it, unless it was alive, of course. But so I started to learn taxidermy just so that I could make that piece, and then that kind of developed into something much more long term. The flies in my work, the flies and the seeds in my work actually kind of act as opposing presences, I guess, not just in terms of the colour of them and the form of them, but both of them are things that represent some kind of, or physically embody some kind of change. So with the seeds, they literally hold the potential for life to grow from them. And with the flies, well, in terms of their life cycle, the fact that the flies I'm using are dead, and then also the fact that flies are an integral part of the process of decay that occur around death. Yeah, they're just quite kind of loaded things, and the way that I'm using them is always controlling them in some way, I guess. They're things that float on the air, and I'm playing with suspense and and gravity. but I'm kind of, I guess, like all the materials I'm using, like I'm kind of rendering them impotent in a way, even though I'm trying to explore them. By my exploration of them, it's something reductive. There's a kind of element of futility in it. The flies, you expect them to be something kind of like a suffocating presence, chaotic. And I quite like playing with that. And within the work, usually they're presented in very, very kind of controlled ways, and also ways where from a distance the form might appear to be something seductive or appealing, and then as you approach it, then after kind of assuming some kind of relationship or understanding with it, whenever you get closer and discover what they actually are, then that kind of changes, I think, for most people. Well, most of the animals in my work are these animals that kind of exist on the periphery between the environments that we've created for ourselves and the rest of the world, like nature more broadly. And I'm interested in that, that kind of transition between those locations, I guess, of kind of relative control and something that's a little bit, well, wilder, for want of a better word. It's kind of weird because a lot of those animals that live on that periphery, we come to view them as pests. So like corvids, crows, foxes, rodents, various types of birds, are all kind of classed as pests and therefore acceptable for humans to kill or to dispose of in whatever way they see fit, just because they don't kind of fit in with how we want things to be, and they're not useful to us in the way that other species that are farmed or whatever would be. Yeah, basically we can't eat them or make money out of them, so kill them. And that's kind of not a very healthy way to view the beauty that surrounds you. And a lot of those animals are also really intelligent creatures as well. So yeah, I kind of interested in those animal presences because we're animals as well, kind of existing in, at least partly in the same environment as them. So it's a strange relationship. Foxes are incredibly beautiful creatures. It's not really the reason that I'm using them. I guess they inhabit that boundary. They're like, maybe in the specific environment that I live in, they're maybe like the most wild creature that's there. And they're mammals as well. They're the closest to us in a lot of ways. So that's another kind of interesting and difficult thing. And also because I'm working on the taxidermy process myself, they're also one of the biggest animals that although they're a small mammal, for me they're one of the biggest animals that I've worked on, and in my drawing practice resulted in some of the most kind of visceral and most challenging works for me to make. So yeah, their physicality is part of that kind of fascination with them for me as well. I was always using animals, but I didn't use taxidermy initially, and then as I was learning about it, as it always seems to be the case with my practice, like the things that kind of occur incidentally to what I'm trying to do end up being a direction that I move in. So with the taxidermy, so with the taxidermy, before you start removing the skin of the animal, you need to take a lot of measurements, a lot of notes, because basically you're going to recreate that thing. So you need to have reference points, for example, like the measurement between the end of the nose and the beginning of the eye, or between the distance between the lips. All of these things, if you don't record them, then you don't have any reference later whenever you're trying to make it, and then it can end up looking like a monster. And so before you start working on the animal, you put the animal on a page. I'm making all these notes, and then I was doing the taxidermy process on the page as well, and then sometimes there's bodily fluids as well going on the page, and like drawing around the animal or drawing certain details that are particularly important. And those pages were just really, really interesting to me. And so I started to kind of not control that process more, not initially anyway, but I started using really, really nice paper to have the animals laid on, and then that in a way kind of makes you handle it differently already. And the marks that are made on it become something kind of, even though they're just incidental things, they become quite precious. So I started using those pages as a basis for my drawings, blood drawings, and then that's kind of grown into using the animals' bodies themselves as a way of making marks on the page. So not just the kind of residues or measurements of them, but the physical body of the animal then will be sitting on the piece of paper, and I'll introduce pigments and moisture and different things in order to not just document the body, but to document like the movements that the body's made. It's all kind of like, I guess it's trying to capture something that's not there anymore. So it's always failure on some level. There's some of the larger drawings, they've even got my footprints on them because the process, especially for the larger works, can be really quite performative in a way. And whenever I'm handling an animal as big as a fox, quite a physical process. So marks from my body as well as the animal's body end up being recorded on the page, but it's kind of, I suppose in a way it's like a byproduct of the, kind of unpredictable. But it's kind of conceptually significant as well, because we're, humans, although we are just kind of one of many, many species, and individually insignificant, our presence or impact on the world is vastly more than any other animal has been in a lot of ways, and negative as well. So having, I feel like it's important to have some kind of evidence of me on the paper alongside the animals that I'm handling. Yeah, it was a difficult one actually. I feel like I didn't really know how I felt about the work until after it was finished. I was thinking about loss, and yeah, the wheel is huge, and I had this experience just after finishing it, like a couple of days after. There was a announcement on the local news that there was a whale washed up on a beach just a little bit north of my house, and I thought I have to go and see it because I haven't actually seen one before and I want to see it even if it is dead. And yeah, I went and I don't know what I was expecting, like something enormous and amazing, and it is this huge, like vast animal. This isn't the biggest species of whale, but it's a very, very big one. But it was just on the beach and it was dead, and it was like next to the sky and the sea. It was just like really small actually, and kind of, yeah, I looked at it for a little bit and thought, okay, well I've seen enough of that. And it was kind of like, yeah, it has got to do with loss. Like it's something that's so absolutely vast and all-encompassing, and then at the same time it's like completely nothing and everyday and kind of insignificant at the same time. And I suppose in the work that kind of comes through in the fact that there's not really anything there. It's just some pieces of plastic on individual threads, and each individual bit of it is not connected to the next. So it's kind of like physically doesn't really exist in a way. Yeah, plastic is important in my work. It's like, it quite often gets misunderstood that I'm making stuff about recycling, and I'm absolutely not. I think for me, like the plastic in my work, it's like an artifact of our contemporary existence, like our wastefulness and our kind of, like the ease with which you can just kind of exist on quite a shallow level and not really, it's very easy to choose to completely miss the point of being alive and just go like that, and then only realize later, like, oh. Yeah, I think like for me, when I'm using the plastic in my work, quite often it has this kind of superficially very attractive, playful kind of presence. But for me personally, and I know people experience it in that way, and it's not like a mistake that they're experiencing it in that way. But for me, it has a very kind of like a suffocating presence almost, like, because superficially, yeah, it's like a nice color and whatever, and I've torn it so that it kind of, the imprint of my thumb or my hand or a human hand on it kind of gives it this organic quality, but it is just this horrible stuff that yeah, this is going to be here way long after you and I are gone. And yeah, so it's quite, yeah, it's a very problematic material in that way. yeah. But then I think it's important that there's some kind of hope in the work as well. Yeah. And I'm never making things with the intention of them being beautiful, but some of the materials I use are very seductive or very, very fine materials. Like they're things that are not so much the plastic maybe, but the imprint of the hand in the plastic makes it something natural in a strange way, or it makes it a natural. It gives it an edge of that. But like the seeds and flies and animals and things like that, like they're things that exist in the world, in nature, so they are just beautiful, but there's a lot more to them than that. Yeah. I think all the things that I'm using in my work, well, you know, the animals are pests for the most part, and then all the little fragments of shopping bags and flies and seeds and things. They're things that just float about on the air or get discarded, or if there's one of them you don't really notice it, you just sweep it away. But en masse and controlled and kind of given this geometry or complexity, then it's not so much that I'm making them into something more interesting, but I'm just kind of hopefully exposing what was already fascinating about them. And all of those materials too, actually. Like you were talking before about the plastic being inside our bodies as well. So it has something similar to the flies and to the seeds in that way, because there are all these materials that kind of work their way like into the cracks somehow and open things up. Yeah, or change things in some way. With the plastic, we don't know how it's going to change things, but it certainly is doing that.